You're listening to the Rural Remix podcast feed, your source for deeper, richer stories about life in rural places. Welcome to Living Traditions, a podcast about folk and traditional arts in Central Appalachia. I'm your host, Nicole Musgrave. At this point in the summer, gardens and farms throughout Appalachia are full of ripening tomatoes and towering corn stalks. It takes growers a lot of planning and effort to make it to this stage. For some, that work includes the practice of seed saving. This involves saving the seeds of the best plants from one growing season in order to sow them the following season. Seed saving allows growers to refine their crops year after year by selecting seeds based on desired traits such as disease resistance, tolerance to environmental conditions, and of course, flavor. Seed saving's been around since agriculture started over 10,000 years ago, and it's a vital component of food sovereignty. That is, people's right to healthy, culturally appropriate food that's produced in harmony with the ecosystem. In fact, seed saving is so important that it's sometimes weaponized. On August 2nd, the New Arab reported that Israeli forces destroyed a Palestinian seed bank in the West Bank, a deliberate attack on an Indigenous people's connection to their land. Unfortunately, this isn't a news story, and it's part of the history of Appalachia, too. Indigenous peoples were the first to practice seed saving here in the mountains. But because of centuries of colonization, forced removal, and targeted cultural oppression, Native communities have been denied from practicing this tradition on their ancestral lands. But one group is working to change that. Teresa Collins brings us a conversation with members of the Appalachian Rekindling Project.
Back in April, as growers were making plans for their gardens, I spoke with Tiffany Joy and Shiloh Delaronde of the Appalachian Rekindling Project. The project is based in East Kentucky and Southwest Virginia. Its mission is to restore Indigenous relationships with the land, support cultural revitalization, and foster ecological care in Appalachia. I caught up with Tiffany and Shiloh to learn more about their work around seed saving and other growing practices. Hi, Tiffany. Hi, Shiloh. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Good morning.
Thank you.
So we're talking about seed saving, but first of all, I want to know just a little bit, or for our listeners to know just a little bit more about each of you, if you wouldn't mind sharing. Tiffany, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Tiffany. My pronouns are she and they. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I was born in Southwest Virginia, just over at the other side of the mountain. I care for land in both places. I'm a visual artist, a literary artist, and I do land work with the Appalachian Rekindling Project. I'm also a program officer with the Appalachian Community Fund.
How about you, Shiloh?
Hello, my name is Shiloh Delaronde. I am a member of the Akwesasne Mohawk community. I also have a family in the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. I live in Knott County presently. I went to school at UK for a few years, and I just try to be in good relationship with the earth, whether that's through working with the earth directly or through kinships with human beings or kinships with more than humans. I just strive to be in good relation.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the Appalachian Rekindling Project and the Rooted Futures Fellowship?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Appalachian Rekindling Project is a multi-part initiative for Indigenous people in Appalachia or with historical relationship to Appalachia to be able to care for land. That's why we started. We have a property in Virginia that's going to host a center where folks can come and stay and interact with the land at no cost to them, can have a gathering space that is truly ours, a place in Appalachia that is truly ours all the time. And we also have land in Kentucky. In Letcher County, we have 63 acres where we will be doing bison restoration. And so a lot of land work there. We have partnered with the Appalachian Community Fund to do the Rooted Futures Fellowship, which Shiloh is a part of. And we are so excited about that. We have partnered with Indigenous fellows working on projects that impact children and families or the intergenerational knowledge transfer that our communities hold. And so it's really beautiful, and I'm excited for folks to hear more about it.
my work focuses on creating a seed bank for intergenerational knowledge transference, but then also the ways that Indigenous people interact with medicine, whether that's through food systems or if it's through spiritual systems or through healing systems. I'm trying to collect as much medicine in any way that Indigenous people can define medicine. And the thing about creating a seed bank, it's also, you can't just have seeds and be like, here you go. You also have to know how to nourish them, how to continue them, how to use them. And I think seed banks are one of the oldest traditions in Indigenous communities. So many stories we have around the first strawberry, the first corn, the first tobacco. To me, those are really seed-saving stories. When you know the origin of a plant, you can tell the origin as you're teaching about the plant. So when I think of Indigenous culture systems, I really do think of seed-saving as a form of knowledge and spiritual transference.
And how did you both come to do this work?
For a really long time, like since I was a little girl, I used to think like someday they're going to let us take care of the land. Like that was like the framework that I was operating off of, which is really sad in hindsight because I'm like, I didn't need permission, but like you do legally need permission. And I had this really incredible experience where I got to go to Canada and see some natives that were doing incredible work in their territory. They have an ICCA, which is an Indigenous and Community Conserved Area. That's their like legal definition of the space. And it really changed things for me because they were like, we don't ask permission. We have an obligation that's older than law. And I was like, yeah, we do. You're right. And so I came home and I started drawing up what would I want for Appalachia? How would I want people to fall in love with the decolonial future? What would that look like? Intangible pieces. Everyone is always like, well, how do we answer the problem of erasure of Indigenous people in Kentucky? And part of how you combat that is you allow us to be here. You allow us to do the work of caring for our own territories. And so we set up a voluntary land tax, and the day after we set it up, someone gave us land. But it was really one of those things where we had to believe it was possible, and also the community had to embrace the vision for this work to get started.
And Shiloh, what about you? What brought you to want to do the seed saving and the seed bank?
Outside of just always having loved working the earth, farming, gardening, seed saving, generations and generations in my family of land workers. But I think what led specifically to this moment was being burnt out as a younger Indigenous person, especially when I was at UK, of always feeling like the only Native person in the room, the only Native person advocating for Native rights or for land rematriation in the spaces I was in, and it was very exhausting. Like, it burnt me out very bad. And so for years, I kind of just like was like, you know what, I'm I'm burnt out, I'm tired, I'm just gonna focus on building like intentional relationships and community with people and finding other Indigenous people to just like hang out with, and just be able to like be a human being who also is Indigenous, you know? And that's really what being Indigenous is all about, is being a human being. And then eventually Tiffany was telling me about ARP once over like a barbecue dinner in London, Kentucky. And I was like, that sounds really incredible. That sounds so important. That sounds like the future of Indigenous liberation, especially in Appalachia. And so the Review of Futures allows me to focus on that relationship with the earth and the relationship with seeds and thinking generations ahead instead of just like 10, 20 years ahead. I think the basis of it all is Indigenous people being able to support each other and be in community together.
Tiffany, I love the way you described the Appalachian Rekindling Project. Could you talk a little more about how seed saving will be worked into the project?
Absolutely. So seeds are really important to both of our properties. Doing land rematriation requires a lot of seed saving and seed care. seed relationships are so crucial, both in returning some seeds that have not been in the territory for a long time and need to go home and can go home, because a lot of those seeds have been saved not necessarily by natives all the time. And we have to kind of go and retrieve those seed relatives as they were, and, allow them to come home and start growing in the valley or up on the mountain again. We have some different challenges between the two different pieces of property. So the Kentucky property, it's been a mountaintop removal site. So it has been through a lot. And environmentally, it's not in a good place for us to plant things that people are going to eat this season. But it is a good place for people to plant things that are going to start to fortify the soil, especially against mudslides. So we're planting more trees there, those stronger root systems. But seeds are really going in this spring already into our Virginia property. And I've been so excited picking out the things and arranging with people who want to just come up and plant something, who maybe don't know a whole lot about what rematriation is at the intellectual level, but they would love to get their hands in some dirt. And that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
What sorts of things are you planting there in the Virginia property?
So I made a list to make sure I get it right. So collard greens, loofah, gourd, okra, sunflowers, sorghum, cabbage, basil, mint, white eagle corn, a lot of varieties of squash, some lavender, some wild strawberries. Yeah, that's what I have so far.
You mentioned rematriation a few times. For folks listening who may not understand what that means, could you explain that?
Absolutely. So rematriation is Indigenous women-led land care and returning of both land and people to their sacred relationship with each other. So historically, it is an Indigenous woman's role within Indigenous community to acknowledge that our relationship with land is sacred and that people's relationship with land is sacred. And it is the woman's place to remind the world that land is not separate from them. It is not something that you're just standing on. That is your relation. That's like something you are connected to, something that you want to go see, that you want to love on, that brings you things and that you bring things to, and that everything is so deeply relational. It is in my teaching that I've been given, the way that it's always been framed for me is that Native women are the reminders of that principle. And so that's what we aim to do. And we also use rematriation as a term intentionally because it does upset a patriarchal, extractive framework that's been in the region for a really long time. We are saying, yes, the women are making decisions. Yes, the women are moving with care and intention. And like, not a soft, like, oh, please let us care for it. It's like, no, we're going to care for the land in the strong Indigenous women way that we do. I'd also love to hear Shiloh's thoughts if you have any.
I mean, definitely, like you hit it right on the head where it's just reminding the land of who it is and the system it belongs to after so many generations of the land being removed from its system of kinship. Because the land remembers us in the same way that we remember the land. And it's always been Indigenous women, Indigenous femmes who are here to remind us of the cycles that we live in and the relationality that we live in with the earth. And so rematriation 100% is us remembering how to belong to the earth, but also reminding the earth what it means to belong with us. And that's especially the property in Letcher that has been the victim of so much violence of extraction and pollution and degradation, to remind that land who it is and that it is a relative, that it is an ancestor, that it is something and someone who belongs in the cycle of rematriation. And that's that's truly so powerful, is to take away the destruction and the extraction and the violence and remind it of its role as a medicine keeper and as a food keeper and as like a shelter for humans and non-humans. To me, rematriation is both us remembering and also the earth remembering after so long of being disconnected.
And the Virginia property, all the wonderful things you said you've planted, are those heirloom seeds, some of those?
Yes. Either they're heirloom seeds from me or they've been gifts from other people. Because it's not been a garden that's like, oh, this is gonna taste so good with this. It's more in this first sowing, it's been folks being like, I saved this from my country. I want you to have it. Or someone saying like, I grow loofah in my garden. Would you like some? And I'm just like, sure. As long as it's appropriate for the growing region, I've been like, sure, let's have it. You know, we have 16.3 acres there. There's plenty of room. Yeah.
So the seeds that you've given are those heirloom seeds that your family's been collecting and growing?
Yes. A couple of them have been. The corn, and I think I forgot to mention there's some tomato varieties, but the tomato varieties are from my personal seed saving through my family. We also have some red runner beans that have been in my family.
Do you have like a favorite story or memory of those seeds growing up?
The different tomato varieties are probably my favorite because tomatoes are so sweet. And I was one of those kids that would like pluck them off the vine and just eat them like apples. It's like an absolute fiend. Destroy, like I would just eat the whole tomato. But I think that's such a sweet memory and probably a memory that a lot of like country kids have growing up is like the tomatoes coming up early. You know that like nobody's gonna necessarily miss one if you take one.
Yeah.
It's not like when the watermelons, you know?
I grew up doing that with strawberries, or it was just like supposed to help my grandma pick through strawberries, but it was just like I would think I would eat more than I would save. And then I'd make myself sick and I just like lay there in the strawberry field trying to recover from like the rush of strawberry sugar, you know?
Exactly right. So, Tiffany, you said you had an heirloom corn. What's that lineage of those seeds?
An auntie gave that to me. Yeah.
Do you know the history of them from her?
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's a tribal corn, so it's white eagle corn. I consider it to be like a sacred crop. I think many of us do. It's called the white eagle corn because the corn patterning sometimes shapes like a white eagle amidst the purple corn kernels. It's very beautiful. Also, if you make it into cornbread, it turns like a lavender color, which is really beautiful.
Ooh.
That sounds
Ooh, yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, I grow it every year. In the first couple of years that I lived in Lexington, I grew it in my friends' yards because I didn't have any land, and they were so kind to let me grow it there. So one of my friends let me grow it the first year I lived in Lexington in her front yard. And I grew 3 stalks. And then the second year that I lived in Lexington, I grew 3 stalks in a different friend's yard because they were a little closer to me. And it was easier to get there than to than to like go across town just to grow my corn. But it was really important to me because getting that relationship with that particular plant is extremely important to me from the time that I was gifted those seeds, which wasn't like as a child, like I was gifted them as an adult. Um, but once I was interested with them, being able to grow it was so important. And I didn't want to be lazy with the gifts that I had been given. And I wanted to be able to share what I had with community. And so this year I get to grow it in our big, beautiful property. I get to grow more than 3, which is
Restocks.
great because I've been saving seed off of all of the stalks prior. So we really can sow quite a bit this time if we want. And that's just really joyous for me. I'm so excited to be putting that corn back, because I know it was there once. I think that strain was there once. Yeah.
And it must make you feel like you have a real connection to your ancestors.
I do. I think knowing that we all tended to the same plant, to these same seeds, like there's just that specific shade of like purple kernel just like evokes something in my heart, you know. I know that we were all thrilled to like peer open the corn stalks and just see like a little bit of purple and know it's like red.
Yeah.
You know, I know that like we sang the same corn song when you're harvesting. And so that's like that piece of connection. And I think corn is so important to our people. It's one of our three sisters. It's an important piece of the balance of our communities.
To me, corn is also very much a symbol of Indigenous people will survive wherever we go. And it's so funny that you mentioned 3 stalks of corn specifically in your friend's yard in Lexington. Because when I lived in Lexington, I also grew 3 stalks of corn of I think it was sweet early corn. I think it was casino corn that I grew in my yard in Lexington. I grew 3 stalks. My landlord was so mad, but it meant absolutely everything to me to be able to grow corn in a traditional way in this property in Lexington where like I was just paying at a time $300-400 a month in rent, which is amazing. But it was being able to work that relationship again with the corn, with the land, with the traditional songs, with spreading ceremonial ashes to like remind the earth of who it is. Just being able to be an Indigenous person and carry with us wherever we go these pieces of ourselves and our relationships. And sometimes it looks like acres of corn. Sometimes it looks like 3 stalks of corn. Sometimes it looks like just having some kernels in a bag that you're keeping in the freezer, you know? So, but that's really lovely to me.
It is. That sounds so wonderful. And Shiloh, do you have heirloom seeds in your collection?
I've moved so much over the past 3-4 years that I don't carry seeds with me in the way that other people do, but that allows me to form new relationships with folks that I meet and hear about their family history of saving seeds. Or some people they're the first generation in their family to start saving seeds, and I think that's lovely. And so it allows me to deepen the connections that I already have and maybe reach out to family here in a little bit with this project and be like, hey, do any of my aunties have some seeds? And so this is really kind of a ground zero for me in terms of like, I don't have a personal heirloom collection. I don't have a personal seed collection. But in that way, I'm kind of like a good conduit because I have plenty of room. I have plenty of room to save seeds and collect and meet up with folks. So that's even more exciting, I think.
Is the seed bank that you're building, is that all from Native people or from just anyone in Appalachian region?
I think the stress is more so on good relations, people who treat their seeds well, people who treat the land well, and can speak to the well-being of their seeds. Some of that has been through Native folks. I have some possum grapes that I recently got from a Cherokee friend and that I'm really excited about. But then also there's some folks here in Letcher County who are very much entirely of settler lineage, who are very dear kin to me, who love these mountains very much and who love being in relationship with these mountains. And they refuse absolutely for me to pay them for the seeds that they had gathered. They're like, no, I want this to go to the Rooted Futures Project. I want this to go to the earth. And got some sorghum seeds that know this climate very well for like, I think at least 2 generations of sorghum. So that's really exciting in terms of like seeing folks love the mountains and love the land and wanting to heal that relationship, whether or not they have any stake in indigeneity.
And what's the hope for the seed bank?
I'm always trying to think in terms of 7 generations down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the land is ready to receive the seeds, and the hope is that this bank would continue for 7 generations as a food source for Indigenous people, as a medicine source, as a spiritual source, and for it to last way longer than I will be alive. And that includes handing down instructions, handing down relationships, handing down systems of caretaking so that these seeds really can go at least 7 more generations down the line. And with climate change, with the shift of growing zones, with all these things changing, who knows really where the seeds will take themselves in terms of the ways that they themselves start to resist and evolve.
So you're collecting not only seeds, but you're collecting the stories that go along with them.
That's the goal. That's the hopes. And sometimes it's stories that I know. Sometimes it's stories that I can find. But that is the hope, is that if there is a traditional story, that it can go along with these seeds so that families can pass stories along, but also not to, I don't want to set any hard definitions for this is what this plant means, because I want folks who come to bring their own meaning to a certain plant and their own relationship to a certain plant.
I have green bean seeds that I got from my grandmother. I'm the 7th generation to grow them, and they call them drying beans because they're good to dry to make shaky beans. And so we have the stories of the people of my family who grew them and where they lived and what they did and all that, and that's really special and important to me. And I feel that connection to my ancestors that I never knew, and I think that's so important. What do you feel like is lost if these seeds are lost or if the stories are lost?
It's a heavy question because I feel like we don't just lose the food itself or the medicine itself. We lose all of the intention that's been in the saving. Seeds have been sewn into people's skirts when they left on the Trail of Tears. Seeds have been braided into people's hair to avoid being searched in times of fascism. Like, I think of how seeds have been a resistance because they're a commitment that your generations are going to survive and they're going to need to eat. And I would not want to dishonor all of that work by ever losing them. Seeds carry stories even if you don't know them. And I don't want to ever lose those stories. And also, I think seeds know the land in the same way that the land knows the seeds. And we can't fully do right by a territory without having those seeds. So if heirloom seeds were to be wiped off the face of the earth, the land would still cry out for those seeds, I think.
How about you, Shiloh? What do you feel like would be lost?
I think that's truly a question that Indigenous people have been asking ourselves for generations and generations and generations, especially with forced removal from our homelands, especially with our cultures being made illegal to practice. I think Indigenous people have been facing this question for 7 generations at least. And like Tiffany was saying too, is the land remembers, and that humans are not the only relatives of the land that save seeds. Bison carry seeds in their fur. Birds, who are constantly carrying seeds. Even just the way that excrement from deer can carry seeds. And so all of the earth is working constantly to be seed keepers, and that we as humans have learned our seed keeping ways from watching animals. And so if for some reason we're no longer able to save seeds and continue this tradition of saving seeds, I think that also means that there's so many bigger implications where our animal kin are also gone, where the earth itself has been just entirely gutted from being able to continue these natural processes. And so I think if we're no longer able to save seeds, I think there's 10, 15, 20 other things that are also at that point and very dire apocalyptic means. And Indigenous people often talk about already having survived our apocalypse and are continuing to survive our apocalypse. And so I think the earth is working constantly to make sure that seeds are continued for generations and generations. And I think, yeah, if that was somehow no longer possible, I think a lot of other things in this world are no longer possible.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate your time. If folks want to learn more about your work, how can they find you?
Folks can always follow the Appalachian Rekindling Project on Instagram at Appalachian_rekindling_project, or they can go to our website, AppalachianRekindlingProject.org. You can also follow the Appalachian Community Fund on Instagram, which is Appalachian Community Fund, for updates on the Rooted Futures Fellowship as it will extend throughout the year. We'll be doing some features as the fellows projects roll out.
Is there anything else you all want to share about your work or your seed saving that I haven't asked about?
I'm just excited to keep being in relationships with folks all throughout the region, all throughout generations of seed saving. It's very exciting.
It is. I really love it. And I really appreciate both of you and your time.
I appreciate you, Teresa.
Thank you for inviting us, Teresa.
You take care.
That was Teresa Collins interviewing Tiffany Joy and Shiloh Delaronde of the Appalachian Rekindling Project. In a recent email, Tiffany and Shiloh shared that they've now planted blight-resistant chestnuts on their Virginia land, along with choke cherries, river cane, hazel, and lots of seeds for an edible forest garden. And the Kentucky land now has some new trees to help revitalize the soil and fortify against sliding. You've been listening to Living Traditions on the Rural Remix podcast feed. Music on today's episode is by Slut Pill, from their self-titled release on the record label Spinster. Living Traditions is a production of the Center for Rural Strategies. Thanks for listening.